Welcome everybody to the release team's keynote. This is Luke. Listen to him.
So the release team's talk, as you probably see in the schedule, was originally Dato's talk, but we made it a team effort. So he prepared the talk, and I'll give the talk.
Have you read it before?
Yeah. I prepared the slides. He prepared the notes for the slides. So let us start with the new release assistants. You have Adam. You have Felipe, who's walking away, and Yuri, who is currently in Ireland. So. So we hope that these new release assistants will make the life of the current release team and especially the release managers better, to make sure that we can, as release managers, more focus on the coordination instead of groundwork. Speaking of coordination, a lot of people already asked me and the release team in particular, what are the release goals and how are we going to track them and things like that. Well, the thing is, the way we did it in the past and the way we did it up to now will change a bit. We don't want to track them anymore on release.debian.org, but we want to move it broader. We want to make sure that everyone can participate in tracking the goals, in helping to solve the issues, and the only thing that then remains in the release hands is to make sure that people will help tracking the goals, will help solving the goals, and will help, of course, updating the wiki pages. So for each release goal, we intend to make a wiki page with a clear description of the release goal, and more importantly, probably with a clear overview of the status and the list of outstanding issues, but also some kind of milestones, so that it's very clear where we want to go, how we want to, and how we want to go there. And of course, coordination also means communication. So you can expect us to communicate more and also to communicate better. And that means, of course, the whole release team within the team itself, but also with, of course, with various other teams like FTP masters, but also with packagers, translators, users, document writers, the press, and things like that. Then an overview of the release goals we currently are thinking of including. First, but probably not the easiest one, multi-arch. So probably many of the members of the audience went to the talk about multi-arch. Multi-arch will probably not be complete for Squeeze, but we want to have basic support for multi-arch in Squeeze. Then another thing, boot performance. One of the main blockers for that was the move to default system shell dash, which happened during DebConf. There are still some little issues to solve there regarding dash, but they will be solved soon. And of course, there's more to tell about boot performance, but I guess we will work that out when we create the page and when we set the goals. Then another really important thing is, of course, high quality packages. That means few parts clean packages, so being able to easily install, upgrade, and remove the package again. But also, for instance, that no package recommends, no package in main recommends on a package outside of main. That if you try to build packages twice or 3 times in a row, that it still works. So that are, of course, very measurable things, but we want in general really high quality packages. Then one thing that we also want to have is support of new package formats. It looks like it will be difficult to make sure that we will already be able to use the new package formats in Squeeze, but we really want to have that support ready so we can use them for Squeeze +1. Another thing is support for future compilers. And the thing there is that we want to know really in advance if packages will fail to build or fail to be usable with new compilers. So like the new GCC, the new Python, the new Perl, things like that. Another release goal is to finally get rid of some old libraries like GTK 1.2. And then last but not least, we still strive to get 0 RC bugs. Currently, there are really many open RC bugs. If I'm not mistaken, it's over 1,000. That's only one per developer, but it's more. So every developer and non-developer, please help with fixing the RC bugs. Even if it's not in your own packages, file patches, work on non-maintainer uploads. Please try to start fixing the RC bugs. So now a different topic. The release team thinks about going to a time-based freeze. Why do we want a time-based freeze? Up till now, we had some releases that took a whole long time. After that, we had Edge and Lenny, which targeted a specific date. But of course, the most important thing is that we have a high-quality distribution. So we don't want to release when we're not ready. So but as many other projects benefit from time-based releases, we want to try something that would work for us, that is time-based, but that would still focus on the quality. And so we thought about time-based freezes. One of the main benefits of time-based freezes is that, well, every developer knows beforehand when we'll freeze. So every developer can make his own plans, can make sure that everything is ready in time, and that he won't hurt the other developers' plans, and that everything should be finished within time. Of course, having a time-based freeze should make the schedule more predictable. And as I already stressed, we don't want a time-based release because we still think quality is more important than the timing of the release. So if we would do a time-based freeze, what would the timing be? we really think that DebConf should not fall in a freeze. So that at DebConf you can do really new stuff. You can still break things. You can, yeah. Well, then after DebConf, you still have time to fix the things you broke. Um, you have time to integrate your changes, possibly disruptive. Um, and as we saw for Edge and Lenny, a spring release worked quite well. So taking these into account, we think a freeze timing of December would be a really good idea. We're coming to that. Then the freeze timing, so what year? 1 year after a release is very short, right? Because if you freeze 1 year after release and you really want to release soon after that, then the release period will be very short and people will complain because we only support upgrading to the next release. So then they have to upgrade to the next release and probably the release afterwards. 3 years is very long because you have the freeze of after 3 years, then you still have the time of the freeze itself. So the release period would be longer than 3 years, which would mean that security support would last more than 4 years, possibly even 5 years, which is very long, and which is currently not in Debian, not a thing we want to do. So about 2 years is probably the best answer. Now, for Squeeze. For Squeeze, we don't want to wait. We want to have the ball rolling. We want to have to make sure that developers that think that time-based freezing is a good idea to start working on it now. We don't want them to have to remember next year that we want to do time-based freezes. Another thing, of course, is if we get the ball rolling early, then we can also open the door to closer collaboration with Ubuntu. Because Ubuntu, the long-time support releases, they happen in even years. So that means if we would freeze in December 2009 and we release in 2010, the long-time support can be in the same year. It would also mean that we can use the same versions or almost the same versions of packages within the releases of both Ubuntu and Debian, which means, of course, that it's more easy for security people, for maintainers, to work together on issues in stable or in LTS. And of course, currently Debian releases happen in odd years, so we think that freezing in December this year would make sure that we get the ball rolling. We make sure that developers show the release team and the project that we really want to go for time-based freezes and for closer collaboration with Ubuntu and maybe others. So, let's start the discussion. Are there any questions or remarks? No one?
Small comment about the boot system. I saw you listed the faster boot as a release goal, and that's definitely a good goal to have. I've been promoting dependency-based boot sequencing and rewriting the boot system to become event-based. Just to make it clear, that's not to make it faster, it's to make it reliable and fix a few bugs in the current system. Faster is a byproduct. Thanks.
My question aims at time. So you want to have a freeze every around 1 year. That would make it more necessary to get our transitions done faster, because there currently are some transitions lying around for some months. And blocking the rest of development.
Well,
and then have another transition after that, and then have another transition after that.
To make it very clear, we want to have a freeze 2 years after every release, but we want this time to be an exception to make sure that people get used to it, that people show that they are really interested in getting there.
Yeah, but my point is a general one, because...
but you talk about 1 year.
Yeah, for this time, but...
I don't know
you
what
need to
it
get
means.
transitions done faster if you really want to keep the time.
So maybe I'm just getting old, but help me with the timeline for just a second. So if we do a freeze in December, what's the expectation for an anticipated attempted release date?
Well, it depends, of course, on the developers, how
Yeah, I
good...
understand that, but if we all actually behave the way we're supposed to behave, what... Yeah. The 1st of January? Or?
No, probably not, because, well, freezing in December will mean that everyone has done all the changes he wanted to do for his package, has included sometimes the new versions of the packages he wanted. So it will mean that we still need some coordination and integration, which will take a couple of months. So if we would if we would make the time-based freeze in December, we think that a freeze of about 3-4 months should be doable.
Okay, because of course the thing that I care about a lot that I've talked about in the past is the negative impact on our overall development process when the freeze drags on for too long. And this is not a complaint to the release team, it's a complaint to all of us for not, being serious enough about, what should happen during the freeze process so that we can actually get to a release. But this is something this is the other part of that equation that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Of course, one of the most important things that still happens during a freeze is fixing the remaining RC bugs.
So, as I understand it, the plan is to have roughly one year release in order to do this synchronization with Ubuntu. I don't think that's a bad goal, but a 1 year release cycle is something that we've not really done before, and also something that, speaking as somebody who likes to run stable, I don't quite fancy doing upgrades every year, even just once. Would it be worthwhile thinking about doing 2 18-month releases rather than going straight on for full-on attempting a 1 year release?
Well, the thing is, if you would do two times 18 months, you don't have the main benefit anymore, because it's not predictable anymore when you freeze. Now it would be December, and in 2 years, December. So it would be very clear for everyone that a freeze is in December in the odd years.
So does the freeze in December include the stage freeze that we have done before, starting with toolchain and then base and then continuing with the rest, or is it going to be total freeze? Or?
Well, we think about a total freeze, because having them in stages confuses too many people.
Oh, okay. There seems to be a bit of confusion as to dates and times and things. As I understand it, the idea is to freeze in December 2009, so the December coming. Approximately 3 or 4 months later, release, and then freeze again in December 2011 and 2013 and 2015. Now, if it takes us 2 months to release, great. That means we have a longer release cycle for next time. If it takes us 6 months to release, then we have a shorter release cycle next time. But the importance is that every developer would know when the freeze is coming. So every developer would know when is a good time to upload disruptive changes and when they should start to be more careful. And it would hopefully make the actual freeze cycle shorter.
Any further questions?
Having them separated by 2 years would also mean that we have one DebConf where we can do whatever we want, and the next DebConf to be a bit more careful and already thinking about having a freeze in December.
I guess I'd like to state the obvious. It just seems way too short to release, to freeze in this coming December with the last release in the second month of the year. There are large institutions which just cannot feasibly upgrade in that time frame. And even if the long-term goal is to get further out, I'd be really concerned about the impact on the organization doing that.
No, we'll do this in an orderly fashion.
Hi, just passing on a question from Tom Veman on IRC. He's just concerned, his question is, so how do we cut 30% of the freeze time?
How do we cut 30% of the freeze time? Well, if everyone would make sure that we have a proper freeze in December, the freeze time should be shorter, and 30% would then be a reasonable goal.
I'm wondering what impact the one-year release cycle, which I think is a good idea if we can solve the problem of institutions not being able to upgrade that often. Maybe that could be solved by an exception to the security support policy to support at 1 more year. But in any case, I'm wondering what impact the 1-year release cycle would have on the ability to get K-FreeBSD i386 and K-FreeBSD AMD64 into the squeeze release as fully supported.
So firstly, I had the same comment as Jimmy did about security support. The blocker for large organizations is not particularly when the next distribution is released. It's when the one before that stops being supported, and we might be in a position to smooth the way for that a little bit. I expected it would require some preparation in the security team. The other thing I was going to say was that as a previous release manager who presided over a very long release, I think we've got into the habit as a project of expecting very long releases, and we have some psychological difficulties now with the concept of shorter ones. This tends to show up in terms of people making very long-term plans that involve things being broken for a long time in between and so on. I would expect a one-year release to be painful. On the other hand, it might be that it would impose some useful discipline on people that would lead to better habits in future and might make things easier for ourselves.
Perhaps as an alternative of extending the release is, sorry, not extending the release, is providing a path to upgrade from old state across 2 releases. It shouldn't be that difficult to support. It basically means we just need to keep transition packages around one more cycle than we normally would. I realize it would be definitely a new policy to be able to go from now very old stable to stable, but it may be worthwhile, especially given the frequency of this new release.
Yeah, I've been in one of the customers I've seen is a rather large institution that takes a rather long time to roll their own derivative of Debian, and they're currently still evaluating Lenny. A yearly release cycle, nice and fine, but they can't evaluate a new distribution every year because they take a year to evaluate it. The reason they use Debian is because that works for them. In some places, so indeed it's needed to jump. If we release every year, then it's needed to allow people to jump a release.
But of course, the intention is not to do a release every year, because I think that will make it very hard for the release team and the project to just keep up. But I think a 1 year exception, so a one-time exception to make about 1 year release should be doable. Also for large institutions and things like that, for large distributions. Because if we make sure that for this one, it would be easier to skip the one release, it should be doable.
Hi. So earlier this week, Steve Langashek had a talk that sort of veered off into the question of how do we build consensus and how do we deal with negative feedback. And one of the things I realized and one of the things that came up in that talk is the importance of empowering people to make decisions, because it's very hard to get the entire project behind something. And so I think one of the things to remember here that's very important is that we should empower the release team to make this kind of decision. Whether it's 1 year or 2 years now, whether it's 2 years or a little bit shorter or a little bit longer in the future, I think we all need to say that that's within what we expect the release team to decide, and that it's okay for them to make that decision. I think it's fine for us to basically give the release team feedback. Well, please consider K4EBSD. Please consider organizations with long lead time. Please consider a lot of things, and I think it's fine for us to give them things to consider. But none of the objections I'm hearing today are so strong that I think the project should overrule the release team. And so I'd ask people to especially if you're just giving input and you're not trying to say the release team is way off in the weeds, to make that clear. And I'd also ask you to be very, very careful and double check and possibly even triple check your objection before you state an objection you believe is so strong. You're saying you think that the release team is sufficiently out of whack that they shouldn't get to make that decision.
I think that having a time-based freeze can also make sure that we as release team give more responsibility to every developer to make his plans and to make sure that he can do the changes he wants within a very very early known time frame.
So I just wanted to respond to some of the comments about this being a one-time thing with the 1 year release cycle. And the fact that it is exceptional means that probably we can do some things to smooth that over for end users. I guess I wanted to say, you know, it is exceptional, but we need to make sure that we do take care of it on our side, because, you know, one busted upgrade is enough to lose an entire institution deciding that they're not going to run Debian anymore because they couldn't do the upgrade, and so they're going to pick something else. Now, as regards doing direct upgrade skipping, multi-arch is going to be an issue for this. So if we're going to try to support a direct upgrade path from Lenny to Squeeze +1, we need to take into consideration that Squeeze +1 is not going to be installable or upgradable to using the Lenny package manager anymore, because we're going to be changing the syntax of the packages file. So it's just something we have to be aware of, and if we're going to do that, we're going to have to provide toolchain backport or package management backports.
Yeah, I think what Steve just said is very true. On the other hand, I mean, I think people sometimes overestimate the difficulty of skip upgrades. I've often skip upgraded, okay, mostly servers. I've skip upgraded several machines from Sarge to Lenny with really no more difficulty than upgrading Etch to Lenny, to be honest. So, and if we can solve the security support situation and provide people with a slower upgrade path, then certainly I think the exercise of trying to do a quick release might be very good for us.
Regarding the providing a specific date for the freeze, I've mentioned that I've talked about that with some of the release members, but I would like to know if we will have a date detailed to the day, or if it's going to be around December, like last time. So
I expected that question earlier. Because, of course, if you say December 2009, well, which December? Is it the 1st December, the 15th, the 20th? Well, currently we are thinking about having a release day, so not a date, but a day beforehand. But probably we are going to experiment with the day, so coming up with a day in about 1 month for this time, and see if that works very well or not, and so we'll have the freedom to change another, to choose another day for the next time.
Any more questions?
You talked about new package formats only be supported in Squeeze +1. Is this also the case for the source version 3.0 source format, or does it concern multi-arc only?
Well, the thing is that currently the archive is not ready. Some of the build demons have issues with the new format. I don't think that will all be solved before the freeze, or maybe it will be before the freeze, but then we cannot really test it anymore to have it properly done for squeeze.
Sorry, when you said pick a day, not a date, can you explain that a bit more? It's not particularly clear.
I meant pick a date, not a month. So not that we not just say December and in December decide what day it will be, but that we say about now it will be like the 15th of December.
Right, okay, thanks.
I just wanted to follow on briefly to what Ian Jackson said just a little bit ago. It's absolutely appropriate for us to make note of the technical hurdles associated with doing things like release skipping, but a lot of the things that I think we think of is where our immediate reaction is, oh, that's horrible, that would be very difficult for users or something like that, aren't really all that terribly difficult. And those who've been around long enough will remember that there have been stable releases of Debian already in the past where the upgrade from the previous stable release started out with, you need to install this new version of the package management tools from this special location before you'll be able to proceed with the upgrade. That in and of itself is, a moderately annoying step, but it's certainly not a complicated step, and it's certainly not the sort of thing any large institution with a bunch of stable machines would have trouble coping with. So let's simultaneously be very good about making note of things like that that would cause us to need to have those sorts of extra transition steps, but simultaneously let's not feel crippled by that. These are all things that we can overcome.
I think that's everybody.
So, well, if no one else has any suggestions or comments or questions anymore, well, let's have a coffee break and discuss it in private.